Tomorrow, he will face his brother Esau, the man he swindled out of a birthright, the man who swore to kill him, the man who is now marching toward him with 400 soldiers. Jacob has spent his entire life running and scheming and surviving by his wits. Tonight, for the first time, his wits have nothing left to offer. And then something grabs him in the dark. We will come back to this river. We will come back to this man. Because what happens on the bank of the Jabbok before sunrise is one of the most violent, most intimate, and most identity-shattering moments in all of Scripture. But to understand what it means, to understand why God reaches down and changes a human name, we have to go back further, much further. Because here is what most people miss about names in the ancient world. A name was not a label. It was not something parents picked from a list because it sounded pleasant or honored a grandparent. In the Hebrew world, and in virtually every ancient Near Eastern culture, a name was a declaration of essence. The Hebrew word for name is Shem, and Shem does not just mean what you are called, it means your breath, your reputation, the sum of everything you are and everything you will be. Josephus, the first-century Jewish historian, records in his Antiquities of the Jews that among the Hebrews, to rename a person was an act of prophetic authority, reserved for God, for a father, or for a king. An ordinary person did not rename another. To rename someone was to reach into their soul and reconstruct it. It was sacred, it was serious, and it was, without exception, an act of power. Which means every time God changes a name in the Bible, he is not updating a file, he is remaking a person. And it always, always comes after a breaking. The first name God ever changed belongs to a man who was 75 years old and had no children. His name was Abram. And God came to him one night and told him to leave everything, his country, his father's house, his entire world, and go to a land he had never seen, in a direction he had not yet been given. And Abram went. The text does not tell us he argued. It does not tell us he negotiated. It simply says he went. That act of obedience cost him everything familiar, and it bought him, for years, then decades, nothing visible in return. He and his wife Sarai grew older. The land God promised was still occupied by other people. The heir God promised had not arrived, and every morning Abram woke up with the same name he had always had, Abram, which in Hebrew means exalted father, the cruelest possible name for a man with no son. You have to sit with that for a moment. Every time someone called his name across a field, every time a neighbor greeted him at the city gate, every time Sarai spoke to him across the tent, they were calling him Exalted Father, a title he had not earned, a name that reminded him daily of the very thing he did not have. For 24 years he carried that name, and then God came to him again. Abram was 99 years old, Sarai was 89, and God said this, "No longer shall your name be called Abram, but your name shall be Abraham, for I have made you the father of a multitude of nations." Pay attention to the tense. God does not say, "I will make you." He says, "I have made you." Present perfect, already done. The multitude of nations exists, in God's sight, before a single one of them is born. Abraham's new name is not a promise about the future. It is a statement about a reality that God can already see from where he stands. This is the first thing you need to understand about how God renames people. He does not name you for who you are. He names you for who you already are, in the version of you that he can see and you cannot. 3 verses later, Sarai becomes Sarah. Both names carry the root for princess or noblewoman, but the shift is subtle and significant. Sarai is possessive, my princess, bound to one household. Sarah is broader, universal. The mother of nations needs a name that belongs to no single tribe, and so God quietly, gently expands her. She laughed when she heard it. You can hardly blame her, but she believed it too, and her laughter became the name of her son, Isaac, which means he laughs. Even her doubt got redeemed into the story, but it gets stranger, because the most dramatic name change in Scripture does not happen in a tent. It does not happen in a vision. It happens in the mud, at midnight, with blood and broken bones, on the bank of a river called Jabbok. Jacob had been running his entire life. He came out of the womb grabbing his twin brother's heel. trying to pull Esau back, trying to be first. His name, Jacob, means heel grabber, or, more honestly, supplanter, deceiver. His parents named him for what he did in his first breath, and he spent the next several decades proving them right. He tricked his brother out of a birthright with a bowl of stew. He deceived his dying, blind father into giving him the blessing meant for Esau. He ran from his brother's murderous rage all the way to a foreign country. He worked 7 years for the woman he loved, was handed the wrong sister on his wedding night, worked 7 more years, and then spent 6 more building his herds against a manipulative father-in-law named Laban. By the time he finally turns back toward home, toward Esau, Jacob is rich, complicated, and exhausted in a way that wealth does not fix. And now Esau is coming, with 400 men. Jacob sends gifts ahead. He prays, one of the most raw, honest prayers in the Old Testament, where he essentially tells God, "You promised me things, and I am terrified, and I need you to hold to what you said." He arranges his family in order of his affection for them, most loved at the back where it is safest. And then he sends them all across the river. And he is alone. Stay with me here because this is where text does something that Bible scholars have argued about for 3,000 years. A man appears. The text calls him a man, but Jacob will later say he has seen God face to face. Hosea, centuries later, will call the figure an angel. And this man, this being, grabs Jacob and wrestles him all night. Not a vision, not a dream, physical, visceral. 2 figures in the mud and dark by a river, locked together for hours, neither one releasing the other. And the text says the being did not prevail against him, which raises a question you are allowed to ask. If this is God, or an angel of God, why can Jacob hold on? And this is where it gets remarkable. The ancient rabbis argued about this for generations. The most compelling answer is this: God was not trying to win. God was trying to break him. Jacob had been surviving on his own strength and his own cleverness his entire life. He had never been in a position where he could not scheme his way out. And so God came to him in the one language Jacob had never been forced to speak, the language of physical helplessness. At some point before dawn, the being touches Jacob's hip socket. One touch, and the hip wrenches out of joint. Jacob is now hobbling, dangling, barely standing, and he still will not let go. The figure says, "Let me go, for the day has broken." And Jacob, broken, bleeding, dragging a dislocated leg, says, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." That is the bravest sentence in the book of Genesis. And the being asks him a question, not because he does not know the answer, because he needs Jacob to say it out loud one final time. What is your name? Jacob, the deceiver, the heel grabber, the man who has been running since birth. And the figure says, "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men, and have prevailed." Yisrael, one who strives with God. Some scholars translate it as God strives, meaning it is God himself, who wrestles on your behalf, even when it feels like he is the one fighting against you. Jacob limps away from that river as the sun rises. He is broken. He is renamed. He is, for the first time in his life, exactly who he was always supposed to be. If you have ever felt like God was fighting you, if you have ever been in a season so painful it felt like a divine attack rather than a divine plan, I want you to hold that image. Jacob walked with a limp for the rest of his life. The wound was permanent. And it was also the proof. Every step he took for the rest of his days was a reminder. He had met God at his most desperate, and he had not let go. Before we go further, I want to ask you something. If you have watched this far, it is probably because some part of you recognizes this pattern, a name that no longer fits, a version of yourself you have outgrown or been broken out of, a season that felt like a river at midnight where something you could not see was pressing against you and you did not know whether to fight or surrender. If that is you, I want you to stay with this because we are not done. If this is your first time here, consider subscribing. We go deep into the parts of Scripture that most people skip, And there are 2 more name changes that will matter to you personally before this video is over. Now, here is the part nobody tells you about how God renames people. He does not always do it with a burning bush and a thunderclap. Sometimes he does it quietly, through a human hand that does not even realize it is being used. Numbers chapter 13. Moses is preparing to send 12 spies into Canaan, the land God has promised, the land that is still occupied by people who are larger, stronger, and better armed than the Israelites. He picks 12 men, 1 from each tribe, and before they go, he does something that is easy to miss if you are reading fast. He changes one man's name. Hoshea, the son of Nun, becomes Yehoshua, Joshua. And the difference between those 2 names is exactly 1 syllable. Moses adds Yah, the short form of God's personal name, YHWH, to the front of Hoshea's name. Hoshea means salvation. Yehoshua means YHWH is salvation. Moses takes a young soldier who carries the concept of rescue in his name and adds God's identity into it. Now watch what happens next. 10 of the 12 spies come back and say the land cannot be taken. The giants are too big. The walls are too high. We are like grasshoppers in their sight. 10 men, 10 failures of nerve, and the 2 who stand against them, who say the land can be taken, that God will fight for them, are Caleb and the man Moses renamed, Joshua, the man with God's name inside his name. He will be the one who leads the nation across the Jordan 40 years later. He will be the one standing at Jericho when the walls come down. He will be the one who drives the conquest of the very land those 10 spies declared impossible. Moses did not know all of that when he added 1 syllable to a young man's name. But God did. Which brings us to a fisherman. His name was Simon. He was impulsive, loud, and deeply loyal in the way that people are loyal before they have been tested. He was the kind of man who would say anything and mean it completely in the moment and fall apart under pressure. Jesus met him on the first day, before a single conversation, before a miracle, a sermon, or a test of any kind. Jesus looked at Simon and he said, "You are Simon, son of John. You shall be called Cephas, Peter, the rock, Petros in Greek." And here is the tension that the first disciples must have felt. Petros does not mean a great boulder. It means a stone, something small enough to hold in your hand. Jesus looked at this enormous, boisterous, unreliable fisherman and named him something that suggested he could be held in a palm. And then, 3 years later, Jesus confirmed the name at Caesarea Philippi, after Peter declared that Jesus was the Christ, the Son of the living God. "On this rock I will build my church," Jesus said. Same name, same man, but now the name was beginning to fit. 3 days after that confirmation, Peter would stand at a charcoal fire in the high priest's courtyard and deny Jesus 3 times. The rock, crumbling in the cold. And yet, after the resurrection, when Jesus appears on a beach and builds a charcoal fire and asks Peter 3 times, "Do you love me?" he does not take the name back. He does not rename Peter to something more accurate. He reinstates him. 3 questions for 3 denials, and Peter, weeping, says each time, "Lord, you know that I love you." The name held, even when the man did not. That is the second thing you need to understand about how God renames people. He does not rename you and then wait to see if you earn it. He renames you, and then he holds the name over you like a promise while you grow into it. Sometimes it takes years, sometimes it takes failure, but the name is not revoked. There is one more name change before we get to the one that will stay with you longest. And this one is different from all the others, because God does not speak it from a burning bush. There is no angel, no wrestling match, no dramatic moment on a lakeshore. This one happens quietly, almost as a footnote, and most readers miss it entirely. Acts chapter 13, verse 9. The text has been calling him Saul for 12 chapters. Saul, the Pharisee. Saul, the persecutor. Saul, the man who stood watching as Stephen was stoned to death, holding the coats of the men throwing the rocks. Saul, who was blinded on a Damascus road by a light brighter than the sun and heard a voice say, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" He spent 3 days blind, 3 days without food or water. 3 days sitting in the ruins of everything he had believed and everything he had been. And then a man named Ananias, a man who was territory of Saul, who had every reason to stay away, came and laid hands on him and called him Brother Saul. And the scales fell from his eyes. That was his conversion. That was his breaking. But his renaming comes later, quietly, in a sentence so understated you could read past it. But Saul, who was also called Paul. No thunderclap, no command from God, no angel. Just a shift. At the precise moment he steps fully into his calling as the apostle to the Gentiles. Saulos was his Hebrew name, his Jewish identity, his Pharisee self. Paulos was Roman, smaller, accessible, built for a world beyond Jerusalem. The persecutor who became a proclaimer needed a name the whole world could say. And here is what I want you to notice about all of these: Abraham, Sarah, Israel, Joshua, Peter, Paul. Every single one of them received their new name at the moment of their greatest transition, not before the hard thing, not after they had recovered from the hard thing, in the middle of it, at the crossing point, right there at the river, in the mud, with the hip broken and the dawn coming and the brother's army somewhere in the distance. God does not rename you when you have it figured out. He renames you when you are finally done pretending that you do. If you have been watching this and something in you feels like you are in a transition, like the old name no longer fits, like the person you were is being dismantled without your full permission, I want you to consider that this might not be a catastrophe. It might be a Jabbok. And if this is speaking to something in your life right now, consider sharing this video with someone who is in the middle of their own river. Because sometimes the most important thing a person needs to hear is that God renames the broken ones, not the polished ones. There is one name change we have not talked about yet. It is the strangest one, the most personal one, and it is the only one in the Bible that has not happened yet. Revelation chapter 2, verse 17. Jesus is speaking to the church in Pergamum, one of 7 letters to 7 churches at the beginning of the apocalypse. And he makes this promise: "To the one who conquers, I will give some of the hidden manna, and I will give him a white stone, with a new name written on the stone, that no one knows except the one who receives it." A white stone, a new name. And the defining feature of this name, the thing that makes it unlike every other name in Scripture, is that it is private. It belongs to one person. No one else will ever know it, not even the angels. In the Roman world, a white stone was used for 2 things: acquittal in a court of law, and an invitation to a banquet. The defendant received a white stone and walked free. The guest received a white stone and walked in. Jesus takes both meanings and collapses them into one image. You are acquitted, and you are invited. You are free, and you belong here. And written on that stone is a name that God has been holding for you since before you were born. Here is what that means. Every name change we have looked at tonight was God declaring the finished version of a person before that person could see it. Abraham heard "father of multitudes" with no son. Israel heard "one who strives with God," still bleeding in the mud. Peter heard "the rock" while he was still figuring out how to fish. The white stone name is the ultimate version of this, the fullest, truest, most complete declaration of who you are. And God has been holding it, waiting for the moment when you cross the final river and he can finally say it out loud. You have never heard your real name yet. Think about that. Every name you have ever carried, the one your parents gave you, the one your failures wrote on you, the name a difficult season pressed into you, not one of those is it. The truest name you will ever carry is being held by the same God who renamed a childless old man, who broke a deceiver's hip in the dark, who looked at an unreliable fisherman and called him a rock before he had earned it. And he is not finished. So here is what I want to leave you with. 3 things. The first, every name change in Scripture followed a breaking. Abraham's decades of barrenness, Jacob's dislocated hip, Peter's 3-fold denial in the cold, Paul's 3 days of blindness on a Damascus road. If you are in a breaking right now, if something that used to define you is being dismantled, that is not evidence that God has abandoned the story. It may be evidence that he is about to rename you. The second, God names you for who you will become, not for who you have been. He speaks the finished version over the unfinished person. He called Abraham Father before the child arrived. He called Peter the rock before the rock had set. He is doing the same with you, calling out a version of you that you may not be able to see yet, but that He has seen since the beginning. And the third, the one I hope stays with you longest. There is a name written on a white stone that no one has ever spoken aloud. It has your essence in it, everything you were made to be, everything the breaking and the renaming and the long river nights were building toward. And one day, in the presence of the one who made you, you will hear it for the first time, and you will know, instantly, completely, that you have been known by that name forever. Go back to the river one more time. The sun is rising over Jabbok. A man limps away from the water's edge, his hip destroyed, his face turned toward the brother he feared and the future he could not yet see. He is not the same man who arrived at that riverbank in the dark. He will never be that man again. He is Israel now, and he walks, broken and renamed, and more himself than he has ever been, into the morning. That is what God does with the ones who will not let go. There is a man alone at a river. It is the middle of the night, the hour when the mind turns dark and the past feels heavier than the future. He has sent his wives across the water. He has sent his children. He has sent every servant and every animal in his possession. And now there is nothing between him and the silence but the sound of water moving over stone. His name is Jacob, and he is terrified.